Will you marry me?
Yes.
He had everything: money, power, fame. Yet no one loved Dennis for who he truly was, until he walked away from it all. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Because tomorrow, I'll be bringing you another story just as powerful and emotional as this one. And trust me, you don't want to miss it. When Dennis Cole's father passed away, the world expected him to step seamlessly into power, and he did. Boardrooms bowed, contracts flowed, and headlines praised the young heir as a man built for legacy. At just 31, he became the face of the Cole empire, carrying the weight of billions with the precision of a seasoned executive. But behind the polished doors of conference halls and charity galas, Dennis was deeply alone. His father's empire had been built on hard work and sacrifice, and Dennis inherited both the fortune and the emptiness that came with it. His penthouse overlooked Manhattan, but its vastness echoed with silence. His mother, Lucy, tried to fill the void. A woman of grace and warmth, she believed in her son's discipline but feared the toll it was taking. "You need someone to share this life with," she often reminded him. She wanted him to find what she had once found with his father: love that wasn't measured in dollars. And then came Alice, Lucy's closest friend. Alice had a dream of her own. Her daughter Jane, paired with Dennis, would unite two powerful families. Jane seemed perfect on paper. Educated, charming, fluent in the language of high society. Alice never missed an opportunity to nudge the idea forward. At luncheons, she slipped compliments across the table. At family dinners, she made sure Jane sat beside Dennis. The newspapers even caught on, branding them New York's golden couple. At first, Dennis tried. He took Jane to dinners, appeared with her at events, and allowed the speculation to swirl. She was beautiful, elegant, and carried herself with confidence. But the more time he spent with her, the more he saw the truth. Jane's heart was never with him. It was with the life his wealth could offer. She spoke endlessly of vacation homes, designer boutiques, and the parties they would host with other wealthy friends. She admired his fortune, not the man who carried it. Dennis noticed how her eyes lit up when talking about yachts or luxury brands, yet dimmed when the conversation turned personal. The breaking point came one afternoon when Dennis overheard her on the phone. She laughed easily, telling a friend that marrying him would mean security forever, and doors opening everywhere. Not once did she mention love. Not once did she mention him. That night, Dennis looked at his reflection in the darkened glass of his office and realized something painful. In Jane's world, he was not a partner but a prize. From then on, he pulled back. Calls went unanswered, dinners ended early, and soon the distance between them grew too wide to ignore. Society whispered about engagements that never came, but Dennis closed the door quietly, determined never to let his heart be treated like a transaction again. Lucy noticed his change but did not press him. She knew her son well enough to understand. He was searching for something deeper, something true, and he would never find it in Jane's polished smile. But Dennis also knew this. As long as he remained in New York, surrounded by people who saw his name before they saw his heart, he would never find the love he craved. If he wanted the truth, he would have to shed everything false. And so, in a decision that shocked even himself, he began to plan a new life. One without penthouses or chauffeurs, without tailored suits or cameras. He would step away from wealth, vanish from the spotlight, and live as an ordinary man. Florida would be his refuge. Dennis arrived in Florida with nothing more than a few bags and a new name. He introduced himself simply as Dennis Lane, leaving Cole behind like an old coat he no longer wished to wear. Gone were the silk ties and polished leather shoes. Now his wardrobe held plain shirts and sturdy trousers. His penthouse view of Manhattan skyscrapers was traded for the modest walls of a rented room over a garage. For the first time in his adult life, no one recognized him. No reporters followed. No cameras flashed. He was no longer the billionaire heir. He was just a man starting again. Finding work wasn't easy. His resume, stripped of powerful names and glowing references, looked unremarkable. But persistence paid off. An opening appeared at the Hale estate, home to Frederick Hale, a 45-year-old businessman known for discipline, precision, and an empire of his own. Frederick needed a driver for his only daughter, Julia. The position offered a stable income and a small room on the estate. Nothing more, nothing less. Dennis accepted. Julia Hale was unlike anyone he had ever met. At just 20, she was already managing parts of her father's businesses. She was clever, strikingly beautiful, but carried herself with an arrogance that made her seem untouchable. She loved nightlife, parties, and the thrill of being the center of attention. To her, Dennis was invisible. Just the man behind the wheel. Keep the car clean. Keep it fast. And don't ask questions, she told him on the first day, sliding into the back seat with her sunglasses perched like a crown. Dennis nodded, swallowing the sting of her tone. He wasn't there to be admired. He wasn't there to impress. He was there to live quietly, to see who he could become without the shield of wealth. Weeks passed in a blur of late-night club pickups, long waits outside boutiques, and endless trips to business meetings. Julia lived recklessly, and Dennis drove her through every turn, every party, every morning after. He kept his silence, observing quietly. And though he told himself not to care, he noticed something beneath Julia's arrogance, a restlessness, a hunger that all her wealth and privilege couldn't seem to satisfy. Then came the night that shifted everything. Rain hammered the streets, slicking the asphalt with danger. Julia was at a downtown club again, and Dennis rushed to fetch her close to midnight. She stumbled toward the car, her steps unsteady, her laughter sharp with drink. As he guided her inside, thunder cracked overhead. The drive back was tense, the storm growing wild. Headlights blurred against the windshield, wipers beating furiously. Dennis slowed for safety, but in an instant, one reckless driver cut across their lane. Tires screeched. Metal clashed. Glass shattered. The world spun. When Dennis opened his eyes again, pain ripped through his body. His leg felt broken, heavy, foreign. The sound of sirens filled the night. Julia was shaken but unharmed, whisked away by her father's men within hours. But Dennis was left behind. Laid up in a quiet guest room at the Hale estate, his future uncertain, he found himself under the unexpected care of someone else entirely. Ella, the housemaid. And it was in her quiet presence that the true story of his life was about to begin. The first days after the accident blurred into a haze of white walls, dull pain, and restless nights. Dennis lay confined to the guest room, his leg strapped in place, his independence stripped away. Mr. Frederick covered his medical bills without ceremony but made it clear that Julia already had a new driver. In the eyes of the Hale household, Dennis was no longer essential. Yet one person lingered. Ella, the maid, came each morning with quiet footsteps, carrying trays of simple meals and fresh linens. She was in her late 20s, soft-spoken, and moved with the kind of grace that came from years of serving others. Unlike Julia, she had no interest in status or spectacle. Her eyes met his without judgment, her hands steady as she helped him adjust pillows or stretch his leg inch by inch. "Try bending it just a little," she said one morning, placing a folded towel beneath his knee. He winced, exhaling sharply. "Half an inch. That's more than yesterday," she smiled. "Tomorrow it'll be more." Her presence was quiet but constant. She never pried into his past, never asked why a man like him had taken such a modest job. Instead, she spoke of simple things, her family in Pensacola, her dream of attending culinary school one day, the recipes she practiced late at night when the house was still. Dennis found himself listening more than speaking, drawn to the warmth in her voice. The silence that had haunted him in New York felt different here. Softer, gentler, filled with the rhythm of her care. Weeks passed. Each day began with therapy. Slow, painful stretches, cautious steps along the hallway with Ella at his side. His progress was measured not in contracts signed or millions earned, but in inches gained, in the first time he stood without gripping the furniture. He began to look forward to her visits. The way she opened the curtains to let in sunlight. The way she laughed softly at his dry humor. The way she treated him, not as an employer, not as a project, but as a person. One evening, rain pattered softly outside as Ella sat peeling an orange by the window. She handed him a slice, her fingers brushing his. "You're calmer than most men I've worked for," she said. Dennis chuckled. "Guess I'm just grateful someone's here. Otherwise, I'd go mad staring at these walls." "You won't be here forever," she reminded him. "You're stubborn. You'll walk again." Her words carried more comfort than any doctor's reassurance. For the first time in years, Dennis felt something stirring, a peace he hadn't known, and a question he hadn't dared ask. Could this woman, so simple and genuine, be the one thing he had searched for all his life? But he was still in disguise. To Ella, he was just a driver. Injured, forgotten, ordinary. She had no idea she was caring for a billionaire. And that secret sat heavily on his chest, even as his heart drew closer to her each day. 6 months passed like the slow turning of seasons. Dennis, once carried from the wreckage, now walked carefully with only the faintest limp. What had started as Ella's patient encouragement became his daily rhythm. Breakfast shared in quiet, slow walks through the garden, laughter over her stories of childhood. And somewhere in that steady routine, affection turned into something deeper. Dennis had fallen in love. He never said it outright, but it lived in the way his eyes lingered when she spoke, the way his chest tightened when she laughed, the way he dreaded the day he would have to leave. Ella never treated him like an invalid or a lost cause. She saw him simply as a man. That truth made his heart ache with gratitude and fear, because she still didn't know who he was. To Ella, he was Dennis Lane, the former chauffeur. A man with little money, few prospects, and a body still healing. She had no idea he was the heir to one of the most powerful business empires in the country. No idea that the modest clothes and small room were part of a disguise. The weight of the lie grew heavier each day. One afternoon, as they walked along the veranda, Dennis finally asked the question that had been haunting him. "Ella, why do you stay here? You're kind, patient. You could work anywhere." She smiled faintly, her gaze drifting toward the garden. "Because it's steady. Because my family needs the money I send home. And because," she hesitated, then added softly, "helping people makes me feel useful. It matters to me." Dennis's throat tightened. He wanted to tell her the truth, that she mattered to him, that she was the one person who had reached him in a way no one else had. But how could he confess, when every detail of his life with her was built on a lie? That night, as he lay awake, guilt gnawed at him. Would she hate him for hiding the truth? Would she think he had only been playing with her heart? The answer came sooner than he expected. At breakfast the next morning, Ella entered the room holding a glossy magazine, her brow furrowed. She had been tidying up near Julia's things when she found it. An article featuring Dennis Cole, billionaire heir, photographed in a boardroom weeks before his supposed disappearance. She placed the magazine on the table, her eyes searching his. "Dennis," she said slowly, "this man looks exactly like you." The room fell silent. His disguise, his refuge, his entire second life, cracked open in an instant. Dennis's heart thundered. He could no longer hide. The truth was standing before him, demanding an answer. Dennis replied, "Many people look like me," anxiously. What would you have done differently in Dennis's place? Confessed earlier, or kept the secret until the very end? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The Florida sun had barely risen when Dennis packed his modest suitcase to avoid any further questions that might make Ella doubt him. He had to think of how to tell her the truth without making her feel betrayed, so folded his few shirts and slipped his cane into the side pocket. His leg was strong enough now. The long nights of pain and recovery were behind him. Mr. Frederick shook his hand politely, thanked him for his service, and moved on. Julia barely noticed his departure. But Ella stood quietly by the garden gate, her apron still dusted with flour from the morning kitchen. "Safe trip, Dennis," she said softly. "Don't forget to keep moving that leg. You're too stubborn to stop now." He wanted to tell her everything in that moment, to confess who he was, what he felt, what her kindness had meant to him. But the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he smiled faintly, touched her hand, and said, "2 weeks. I'll send for you." Her brow furrowed, confusion flickering in her eyes. "Send for me? Why?" "You'll see," he replied, his voice steady though his heart raced. "There's more I need to tell you. More than I ever have." With that, he boarded his flight. When the jet lifted into the clouds, the skyline of New York soon stretched before him. A city of steel and ambition, his empire waiting like a long-forgotten crown. The Cole mansion stood tall against the horizon, its polished floors gleaming, its halls echoing with silence. For the first time, Dennis didn't dread stepping inside. His mother, Lucy, welcomed him with tears in her eyes. "You look different," she whispered, studying his face. "Lighter, happier." "I am," Dennis admitted. "I've found something real, Mom. Someone real." Her eyes softened with understanding. "Tell me about her." And so he did. He spoke of Ella, the woman who had helped him walk again, who had listened when no one else cared, who saw him not as a billionaire or a name in a magazine but as a man struggling to heal. Lucy listened with quiet joy, her heart swelling with hope. For the first time in years, Dennis felt certain. He knew what he had to do. Within days, he set the plan in motion. He called Ella, his voice warm but urgent. "Ella, I'd like you to visit me in New York. I'll send a car for you. Please say yes." There was a pause on the other end of the line, the soft hum of distance between them. Then came her answer, gentle, hesitant, but filled with trust. "All right, Dennis. I'll come." Now everything depended on the moment she stepped into his world and saw the truth for herself. 2 weeks later, a sleek black car rolled through the quiet streets of Pensacola and stopped outside Ella's modest apartment. The driver stepped out, handed her an envelope, and said simply, "Mr. Cole is expecting you." The name startled her, Cole, not Lane. But she said nothing, clutching her small bag as she slid into the back seat. The car glided northward, the hours unfolding like chapters in a story she wasn't ready to read. By the time the car entered New York, twilight draped the city in gold. Towers of glass caught the fading light, the hum of traffic a constant symphony. Ella's hands trembled slightly as the vehicle slowed before a gated estate. The Cole mansion stood tall and unyielding, its marble steps gleaming under lanterns. The driver opened the door. Ella stepped out, her eyes widening at the sheer scale of it all. The columns, the carved doors, the manicured gardens stretching into the distance. This was no ordinary home. And there, waiting at the top of the steps, stood Dennis. He wasn't in plain shirts or worn trousers anymore. Tonight, he wore a tailored suit, his posture confident, his gaze steady. Yet behind the polished image, his eyes carried the same warmth she had known in Florida. "Dennis." Her voice trembled, part disbelief, part hurt. "What is this?" He descended the steps slowly, each stride deliberate. "Ella, I owe you the truth." She shook her head, her chest tightening. "You're not who you said you were." "No," he admitted softly. "I'm Dennis Cole. My father left me an empire, and I disappeared into another life because I was tired of being loved for my money, for my name. I thought if I stripped it all away, maybe I could find someone who saw me. Not the billionaire, not the heir, just me." Ella's eyes glistened, torn between anger and confusion. "And you lied. 4 months. You let me care for you, talk with you, trust you. All while hiding this." "I know," Dennis whispered, his voice breaking. "And it haunts me every day. But Ella, when I was broken and forgotten, you saw me. You helped me stand when I couldn't take a single step on my own. You never once asked what I could give you. You gave without expecting anything. That's how I know what I feel for you is real." Silence hung heavy between them, broken only by the distant hum of the city. Then, from the doorway, Lucy appeared. With gentle eyes, she approached Ella, taking her hand warmly. "I'm Dennis's mother," she said softly. "And I need you to know, my son has never spoken of anyone the way he speaks of you. You reached him in ways no fortune ever could. For that I will always be grateful." Tears slid down Ella's cheeks as she looked from mother to son. The anger in her chest loosened, replaced by the weight of something undeniable. Dennis stepped closer, his voice trembling now. "I don't expect forgiveness overnight. But I can promise you this. I will never hide from you again. If you'll let me, I want to build a life with you. Not as Dennis Cole the billionaire, but as Dennis, the man you helped stand again." And then, with the city lights burning behind him, he knelt on one knee and opened a small velvet box. Inside shimmered a ring, simple yet elegant, chosen not for its price, but for its meaning. "Ella," he said, his voice raw, "will you marry me?" The world seemed to pause. Ella's breath caught, her heart torn between disbelief and the overwhelming truth of what she felt. Finally, through tears and trembling lips, she whispered, "Yes."
"Will you marry me?"
Yes.
The Cole mansion, once echoing with silence, now rang with laughter, music, and the warmth of family. Where polished marble had once felt cold, flowers now bloomed in every corner, and the grand ballroom glowed with golden light. Guests from around the world had gathered for a wedding no one expected. The billionaire heir, Dennis Cole, marrying not a socialite or heiress, but a woman who once worked quietly as a maid. Ella stood radiant in a gown of simple elegance, her smile brighter than any jewel. As she walked down the aisle, Dennis's eyes filled with tears. This moment was more than a ceremony. It was redemption. After years of searching, of heartbreak, of feeling unseen, he had found the one person who loved him for who he truly was. Lucy wept openly, her hand pressed to her heart. She had prayed for her son to find a love as true as hers had once been, and here it was before her eyes. Ella bowed her head respectfully as Lucy embraced her, whispering, "Thank you for saving him, not just his body but his spirit." The vows were simple, spoken not to impress the world but to bind two hearts. Dennis promised honesty, the one thing he had failed to give at first. Ella promised faith, the one thing that had carried him through. When they sealed their promise with a kiss, the room erupted in applause, the music soaring to match the joy in their hearts. Life afterward was not a fairy tale without challenge, but it was real. Dennis returned to his empire with a new perspective, no longer enslaved by its weight. To him, it was no longer a burden of legacy but a tool, something to protect, to grow, and to share. He supported Ella's dream of culinary school, investing in a program that gave opportunities to others with her same passion. Together, they built a balance between business and love, wealth and simplicity. Julia remained a distant figure, her life continuing in its whirl of parties and society. Frederick, though skeptical at first, came to respect Ella for the strength she had shown Dennis in his darkest days. But the truest transformation was within Dennis himself. The man who once looked at the city from a lonely penthouse now looked at it hand in hand with the woman who had seen him at his weakest and loved him anyway. He no longer sought love through fortune. He had found it through truth. As the years stretched forward, people would often whisper about how unusual their story was. A billionaire who disguised himself as a chauffeur, only to find love in the simplest, most unexpected place. But for Dennis and Ella, it was not unusual at all. It was the life they had chosen, one built not on money, but on sincerity. And whenever Dennis thought back to the night of the accident, the pain, the loneliness, the fear, he realized something extraordinary. What once felt like his darkest hour was the doorway to everything he had ever hoped for. Love, real love, had found him when he least deserved it and needed it most. So tell me, my beautiful family and friends, what lesson speaks to you most from this story? Is it that wealth can't buy sincerity, or that true love often hides in the most unexpected places? Let's talk about it in the comments below. And if this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow I'll bring you another tale just as powerful. Until then, remember, sometimes the disguise we wear leads us to the truth we never knew we were searching for. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as interesting and even more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out.